That was Squirm Worm by the Track Tribe, right here on 90.6 Anti-Chord Radio. As always, it's your host, DJ Metanoia, spinning the biggest hits in jazz for tonight's special show. If you've been a follower of the show, you'll know I have never been one to choose to listen to jazz. In fact, there's not much instrumental-based music I do listen to daily. I have indulged in piano and violin compositions from time to time, but that is the extent of it. So, why have I decided to play jazz on this fine evening? Well, it is in honor of a listener heavily suggesting a jazz movie called Blue Giant. It was so heavily suggested that 63 listeners watched it per their recommendation, so I had to see what all the hype was about. And I have to say, after watching this movie, I would give it a... Wait, you didn't think I'd reveal my score this early, did you? If I did that, you would stop listening to the show, and we can't have that. I'll delve into my thoughts on the story after this short musical break. Here's The Moondrops by Nathan Moore. When doing research for this show, that tune caught my attention, much like the story of Blue Giant. Yes, our main cast is aspiring to be the best performers possible to land a gig at a prestigious music institution, much like any other music anime you've probably seen. But it's the subject matter that differentiates this story for me: jazz. Despite being from the state that is credited with bringing jazz to life, I knew next to nothing about jazz before going in, so having the chance to gain some exposure and see some of the behind-the-scenes work that goes into it was great. Otherwise, the story had typical plot points that you'd expect for people trying to reach a specific goal. Team bonding and training montages, off-screening the smaller performances, group conflict that leads to a band breakup, a coming together moment when they inevitably realize they want to be in a band together again, and the achievement of the final goal. These predictable points are almost guaranteed to happen in this style of story, and I'm fine with that since it works. The real determinant of the staying power of these shows is the characters, and I am happy to report Blue Giant delivers in that department with Dai, Yukinori, and Yamada. Dai is the main character of the trio, and from the beginning I was glad he was not painted as a gifted from birth musician. Getting to watch him constantly practice no matter where he was in life was refreshing, since other musical anime have a gifted protagonist who either has confidence issues or familial issues that they must overcome to perform at their best. Dai feels like a more relatable character in this regard, since there are more success stories of people, not just in music, but in all fields and careers who made it because they worked hard and not due to an inborn talent. And Dai seemed to understand this, telling Yukinori everyone has to start from somewhere when Yamada wanted to join the band with zero musical experience. Adding to this realism is the fact that no one held him on a pedestal or worshipped the ground he walked on. People appreciated his musicship and recognized how passionate he was about his work, which is exactly what Dai wanted in his pursuit to be the best jazz musician player in the world. He never cared about the money. He picked up side jobs to support himself, seemed to never go to crowded areas when playing in public, and never set out a tip jar or anything while playing. He never cared about the fame, aside from recognizing the prestige of the So Blue Lounge in the jazz community as the Blue Giant. His goal was born from a pure love of jazz, deep-seated optimism that he could bring jazz to the masses and expand appreciation of the genre. In short, I view Dai as one of the most pure, strong-willed characters I've ever seen in a slice-of-life setting. It could be argued he is almost too pure and strong-willed, since I kept waiting for a tragic backstory to be revealed that resulted in him developing into his present self. But it never came. In fact, Dai is a strange character, in that he never develops, at least in my opinion, and was fully realized from the beginning. Sure, his performances got better, but the personal aspect of his character remained the same. I did, however, question his most disregarding stance on Yukinori's struggle to become better. I felt it clashed with how he treated Yamada when he was trying to get better. Even Yamada points this out, but we never get an explanation of why Dai treated the situation so differently, resulting in it feeling like a forced interaction to force a band breakup. Also, I found it extremely unbelievable that Dai, and even Yamada, so easily shook off Yukinori almost dying and went into their So Blue performance the next day. I would have loved to see them make a few mistakes in the beginning before regrouping to deliver the best performance of the movie, but they play it perfectly the first time. I will say there is a clear emotion in the performance in honor of Yukinori, but I don't believe anyone would be able to keep it together like that given the stakes and circumstances. Regardless, Dai's lack of development kind of works for me, since he serves as a driving force for the development of Yukinori and Yamada. I'll dive into that next, after listening to The Black Cat by Aaron Kinney, right here on 90.6 Anycore Radio. I'm sure that's a song Dai would approve of for sure, but I'm unsure how Yukinori and Yamada would feel. Yukinori and Yamada are on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to musical prowess. Yukinori is the gifted from birth character, while Yamada is the newcomer with no talent. I'll start with my opinion of Yukinori, which started rough but became more favorable throughout the movie. Yukinori seemed so absorbed in his bubble of being great that he closed off all emotions, aside from confidence, even being unable to praise Dai's performance despite being amazed at how great it was. Despite claiming he wanted to expose the public to modern jazz, I felt Yukinori had lost sight of that goal, especially due to his persistence in keeping Yamada out of the band. Thankfully, Yukinori became more accepting of Yamada and secretly found ways to help Yamada learn drums more effectively. He slowly became more human as opposed to just a piano-playing machine, which was creatively made evident through the musical performances as well. The first few times Yukinori played with the band, I felt that the piano sounded the same every single time, since I found myself focusing on that sound over the saxophone due to my preposition towards the piano. Even without focusing on Dai's performance, it was easy to tell the saxophone solos were different every single time. It turns out I was right, and Yukinori was just doing the same thing every time since he thought it was masterful, like he had peaked as a pianist. The So Blue manager gave him a reality check though, saying his performance was the worst out of the bunch, being topped even by newcomer Yamada who, in the manager's own words, did the bare minimum. While this knocked Yukinori down for a while, he regained sight of his passion for piano, putting out a brilliant piano solo in his comeback performance. I am so grateful that this was explored, since gifted from birth protagonists seldom get told they are not as good as they think they are. Often, people say they have so much more potential, or attempt to find external problems that are impacting the character's gifts somehow. Blue Giant embraces the reality that it is often our own complacency that results in our efforts becoming blunted or inadequate, and the only way out of that complacency is reflection and hard work. Yukinori was talented in the beginning, but it only became fully realized once he recognized talent is no substitute for hard work and passion. Yamada follows a very similar arc, but it goes in reverse. I enjoyed his character the most since he was the most relatable. I have been in his position of feeling like I am dragging a team down when trying something new, and have even had Yukinoris in my life that didn't fully support my entrance into their field. I feel many listeners of the show right now can think of someone who fits that description, and it may even be yourself. This is why Yamada is my favorite and was a great way to round out the trio. Now, about his story arc. Yamada begins as lost in his original goal of college and it not shaping out as he wanted it to. But then one night when Dai asks him to drum for him, Yamada falls in love with jazz and feels like he has this new calling. This passion drives him to take out loans to buy equipment and rigorously train so he can follow Dai on his pursuit to the top. There are several high and low points throughout his journey, from being excited that he learned a new note to having self-doubts about his potential to grow. Despite all this, as long as he had at least one person believing in him, whether it was Dai encouraging him to not give up or a stranger praising his improvements, Yamada never gave up. And I'm glad he didn't, as his final drum solo was the perfect culmination of everything he had been through, and demonstrated the benefit of working hard and not giving up. Yamada was the most human to me, a perfect example of the human experience we all go through, no matter what walk of life you come from. There were times I wished Yamada was the main character, so I could follow him after the So Blue Lounge performance. I feel so robbed that Yamada disappears after that performance, with no mention of him even in the post-credits scene. He was clearly distraught from Jazz, would no longer be playing together, but I wanted to see if his love for Jazz would persist, and how he would navigate finding a new band to play with, one that was full of strangers. Overall, the main trio was perfectly balanced, and I'd be interested in following any of them going forward, with Yamada being at the top of the list. All three characters finished their arcs here, but I can see potential in all of them to further develop in interesting ways. The supporting cast was also appreciated, but most play a smaller role aside from the bar owner Akito, who supported the boys from the beginning. She reminded me a lot of Otose from Gintama in that she heavily supported the trio because they reminded her of past adventures, and presumably her late husband. I would have loved to have a flashback with Akito to see where her love of jazz stemmed from, since I think that reasoning adds another depth to the characters and helps you understand their motivations. Nevertheless, the supporting cast excels in supporting the main trio, and helps to push them along in their journey, despite most not even having names. Well, that was longer than expected, and I want to move on to a less serious discussion. Let's see. Yes. I'll tackle the voice acting and animation right after a brief word from our sponsor. Are you a victim of a hit and run? Injured fighting for a Stanley Cup? Had a truck fail at isekaiing you but left your gifted piano hands in shambles before the biggest performance of your life? If you or a loved one have experienced any of these, you may be entitled to compensation. The attorneys at Legit and Legal Law Firm have your back. We will fight for you until you win your case or are satisfied with your compensation. Just look at one satisfied customer who, after consulting with our team, was able to play piano with one hand and one eye. So what are you waiting for? Give us a call today at 1-800-NOT-REAL-TODAY. Yes, thank you to our sponsor for making this show possible. I'm DJ Metanoia here on 90.6 Anychord Radio, and if you're just joining us, I am reviewing the jazz-filled movie Blue Giant, which, despite the name, has no Jolly Blue Giant in the movie. What a bummer. But what it does have is amazing voice acting. The voice actors did a great job getting the characters' personalities across, and giving variation in their performances to match the circumstances. I think the most impressive voice actor was Yukinori's, since he was able to put a small tinge of confidence on most of his lines without it coming off as cringy or too much. I also appreciated his ability to subtly change his tone when Yukinori was letting his confident mask slip, when complimenting Dai or Yamada, and when Yukinori was dealing with his internal conflict. The confident tinge was still there, but you could tell Yukinori was not his usual self. Dai and Yamada's voice actors were great at filling their roles as well, but there was not as much room to have a dynamic performance as Yukinori's character offered. Yamada had more range since he wasn't optimistic the entire time like Dai, but Dai's voice actor demonstrated Dai's other emotions well when the time came. While the voice acting is to be applauded for all around, I can't say the same thing for the animation. The animation in this movie is weird, in a mixed bag, gray area kinda way. Outside of the performances, it reminded me of older art styles that had been improved with modern techniques and animation improvements. It is one of the few anime that have captured this distinct style, and I think it perfectly fits the genre. If you are someone who wants Mappa or Ufotable unlimited budget animation, it may be too much of a distraction for you to watch this, because the movie fully embraces its art style and does it really well. The glints of gold and blue that would appear on the instruments or objects in the world were a nice stylistic touch. Sometimes they would sync up with the soundtrack or even emphasize different actions, which is even more appreciated. The different lounges the band played in all had a distinct style to them, giving a real sense of moving up the ranks to bigger and better clubs. It was clear they didn't want to cut corners with the animation and wanted to do justice to the source material, which is why it baffles me why CGI was used! Calm down, Metanoia. Let me play another song to cool off. Then I'll talk about the biggest stain in this movie. Here's Busy City by Track Tribe. That was much needed. I'll try to keep calm while discussing the CGI, but no promises. I was partially okay with the CGI the first time I saw it. Sure, I thought it looked like a Fortnite character was dropped into the movie, but since it was contained in its own bubble, it was okay. But then the CGI got mixed in with the 2D animation and it was awful. It was so insanely jarring to go from 2D to CGI, to 2D to CGI, to a mix, all in the same performance. I felt so disturbed and repulsed every time it happened. Making the problem worse is that the CGI was often the focus of the shot, as opposed to it just being in the background. I don't think CGI has reached a point where it can compete with traditional animation when both are used. Some anime use CGI here and there, mixed in with 2D animation, but there is either enough distance between the two art styles, or the CGI is stylized to fit the 2D animation. That wasn't done here, as it seems they just cel-shaded the models and hoped it was good enough. And it wasn't. To make matters worse, I found out they didn't even need to use the CGI. I thought maybe they had to use CGI to pull off some of the performances. But then the finale had an insane drum solo that was done completely in regular animation. And it was more intense than the other performances. If that solo can be done well without CGI, I don't see why everything else could have been made without it as well. Now, it's not as bad as X-Arm. That would be really hard to do. And I think the CGI here itself is okay in isolation, aside from the few scenes where it looks really bad on the faces. But I can't help but feel the CGI is holding this movie back from a 10 out of 10. It was probably the most jarring thing I've ever experienced, and it took away from the feel-good emotions some of the performances were instilling in me. It was the equivalent of having the final performance of Your Lie in April done in CGI. You may love the characters and the music, but all you can focus on is the CGI, so any meaning or catharsis from the performance is dissipated. Man, all of this CGI talk is depressing. In honor of the aforementioned series, here's one of my favorite compositions to just calm down and feel good. It's Handprints by John DeLay and the 41 Players, right here on 90.6 Any Chord Radio. That always puts me in my feels. Such a great song. Now, it's time for the most controversial part of my review. I was not a big fan of the music. At first. My limited jazz exposure and tendency to not listen to instrumentals made me turn my head at the first performances by Dai, wondering if it actually sounded good or if this was a rusty performance. This question was made harder to answer due to the unique angle of Dai not being celebrated as a gifted from birth performer, giving me nothing to go off of to determine if it was good. Of course, as people reacted to his performance, it became clear he was really good at playing, but I still wasn't impressed. Sure, he could play more notes than I could, but I didn't think it was anything to write home about, much less rope 63 other people into watching the movie. As the movie progressed, the piano and then the drums were added to the magic as Yukinori and Yamada joined the band. It goes without saying that the performances also got better as the movie progressed, partly due to the added instruments, partly due to Dai improving, and partly due to me getting more comfortable with what jazz sounds like. I wish they had more songs in the movie for the group performances, since they performed the same song in 3 of the performances. I could understand doing it once early in the movie and then at the end to demonstrate improvement, but 3 times seems a bit much. The variation in the instrumental solos makes it more forgivable, but those solos could have been done in any song, since they are unscripted moments in a song. With that said, the songs were good and allowed everyone to shine even if they did not have a solo performance in that particular moment. Speaking of solo performances, I thought each character had a great solo in the movie, but if I had to rank them, I would put Yukinori's first, Dai's second, and Yamada's third, although Dai and Yamada could probably be interchanged easily. Yukinori's stands out for me since I am partial to the piano, and I feel that the emotions were better conveyed there than on the saxophone or drums. Dai's performances definitely had emotions in them, but the rough nature of the saxophone made it harder to discern what exactly he was feeling. Maybe to an avid listener of jazz it is clearer, but as a newcomer to the genre, I didn't pick up on it but still enjoyed the sound. Yamada's solo was great since it demonstrated immense growth from the beginning of the movie, and did a great job of showing how confident he had become. His impromptu solo at the final group performance was also a nice touch, since it showed Yamada didn't want to let go of the group and hated that this was their last performance. What keeps me from ranking this higher than Yukinori or Dai's solo is that it seemed the simplest out of the 3. As a metal listener, I had heard a lot of insane drum work, so everything else just pales in comparison. It was still a great solo, but it doesn't rise to the same technical complexities as the other solos. When the focus wasn't on the CGI during the performances, the camera work and environments created by the music were executed very well. While some of the camera angles were questionable, they mostly worked to create a dynamic feel to the scene as the performance went on. The real star was the environmental artwork and effects, especially during the solos. While Yamada was robbed yet again by having no environment or special effects for his solo, Yukinori and Dai had magical landscapes painted for theirs. The artistic choice of showing Yukinori within ice before diving into his new and improved solo was brilliant, watching him finally break out of his cold robotic state to embrace his passion for piano and remember why he pursued this career in the first place. Dai's special effects aired more towards demonstrating how powerful his notes hit, with a lot of shaking and Dragon Ball-esque auras around him. While not as impressive as Yukinori's landscapes, I felt like it added to the performance and made it more interesting to watch. Oh, looks like we have a caller on line 1. Hello, thanks for calling in. Were you also impressed by the performances?
Hell no. I may have enjoyed some of the visuals, but come on, having Jazz take the entire audience into a black hole like that, and then flying them around? Give me a break. The visuals are neat, sure, but only because the rest of the movie was so middle of the road that it's the only part that does stand out. It doesn't do it any favors, I'll tell you what. No amount of high quality music creates mass delusions like that.
Clearly, that caller hasn't been moved by music before. Maybe if he listened to this show more regularly, he would be sent to space by some of the songs I pick. Okay, yes, no song will literally send you to space. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. But music is meant to elevate you to a higher, more peaceful plane of existence. And even if you did not feel that way in this movie, which I know I didn't, you can still appreciate the symbolism behind this landscape. The black hole shows a red side and a blue side, with the shadows of our trio being shown in both at the same time, while white outlines of them are shown in the middle. To me, this symbolizes being between Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. The band relives their memories of the past, the Alpha, while recognizing this is their last performance together, the Omega. Despite these realizations, they choose to live in the moment and give a performance more powerful than anything before and anything afterward. I feel like this was foreshadowed earlier in the movie when Yamada, clearly aged well into adulthood, remarked that he was there for the greatest performance Dai ever gave. And it was the greatest performance of the movie by far. And all I have left to say about it is one word: wow. A final note on the music is a very subjective one, in that I feel it was designed in such a way that your appreciation of it and desire to listen grew as the movie progressed. Now, I'm not saying they intentionally made bad performances to serve a point, but I think they put the roughest, least beginner-friendly sounding tracks up front, with the more pleasant listens towards the end. I feel this was done as a tie-in with Dai's goal of exposing the community to jazz, and serves as a realistic viewpoint on people experiencing new things. The first time you try something new, whether it's an activity or music, you may be put off by it at first. It may feel rough and something you are unsure how to feel about, but as you engage with it more, you may realize that you just didn't understand it at first, and now that you do understand it, you have a more positive view of it. This could be me reading too far into it, but I walked away with a strong feeling that this was the case, so I don't think I was the only one. Before we close out this program with my final thoughts, I will play you one last song. Here's Los Encinos by Quincas Moreira. Blue Giant was a great dive into the world of jazz, for both newcomers and veterans alike, earning an easy 9 out of 10. The main trio gives everyone a person to relate to, and covers story arcs you will likely experience at some point in life. Completely embracing realism and covering the realities of life makes this movie stand out amongst those who shy away from it. The story serves as a great vessel to leave viewers with two central messages in mind. The first is not to lose sight of your passion in pursuit of your goals. Your efforts may become ineffective and people around you can tell when you are just going through the motions. Taking time to reflect on why you are walking the path you are on can open doors to develop yourself further, assuming you are willing and dedicated to put in the work that it takes to get there. The second message is it's natural for good things to come to an end. While Jazz was a powerful group, they realized to go further in life they would have to disband. Their experiences together have shaped their futures and will remain as happy memories during their life. But remaining together would not allow everyone to reach their full potential. These messages, wrapped together with masterful music performances and artwork befitting of the genre, serve a complete jazz experience that even Barry Bee Benson would approve of. The only reason it did not get a 10 out of 10 was the jarring CGI that pulled me out of the performances more times than I would have liked. With that, I appreciate you joining me for the show. I highly recommend giving Blue Giant a watch if anything in this review caught your attention. And to answer the question you have probably been asking since this show started, yes, I do like jazz. This is DJ Metanoia signing off.